If classic horror is like an old VHS tape you already know the ending to, then new horror is that unnamed folder on your desktop you don't remember downloading. Today we're not talking about clown movies or haunted houses in Ohio. Today we're diving into something more recent, stranger, and for some reason, more familiar. Like you've already dreamed these stories, like they've always been there, waiting for you. We've got a manga that blends guilt with sea monsters, a video game where the only thing left to eat is mouthwash, a series that looks like a parody, but watches you through Tulio Trevino's eye, a love story that smells like dead squirrel, and a divine machine powered by the torture of a living angel. All of this is real, and if it's not, your brain already decided it is. So get comfortable, turn off the lights, and prepare to discover the weirdest, most disturbing, and most promising creations in modern horror. Because this isn't just entertainment, this is a warning. With that said, let's begin. Centuria is a dark fantasy manga that launched recently on Shonen Jump Plus. It's written and illustrated by Toru Kurami, a former assistant to Chainsaw Man's Tatsuki Fujimoto, and you can definitely feel it. This isn't a power fantasy. It's a slow descent into something stranger and much more painful. The story follows Julian, a boy born into slavery, whose only experience of love was the moment his mother sold him with a smile. One day, he kills the blacksmith who owns him and escapes onto a ship filled with other slaves. There, he meets Mir, a pregnant woman who does something he's never experienced before. She protects him, shares food with him, treats him like a human being. It's the first time Julian feels seen. But kindness doesn't last long in Centuria. When the ship hits a supply crisis, the captain decides to solve the problem by killing the slaves. One by one, they're rounded up to be executed, until only Julian and Mir are left. Just as they're about to be killed, something ancient stirs in the sea. A primordial, shapeless entity rises from the depths, awakened by the blood spilled on the deck. It makes a silent offer. Julian is granted a second life, but not without cost. The souls of the dead now live inside him. He is immortal, and he's no longer just himself. From there, the manga shifts from survival to something deeper. Julian escapes with Diana, the newborn daughter of Mir, and begins a journey not to defeat a villain or save the world, but to give this child a life better than the one he had. But he's not a hero. He's a survivor dragging the weight of dozens of lives, and with each step, that burden grows heavier. The world around him isn't broken, it's rotting. Villages and cities are either collapsing or ruled by systems so cruel they barely qualify as human. And then there are the creatures, inhuman, malformed beings that defy anatomy and reason. The kind of monsters that feel like they were born from an infected dream. Their bodies twist in impossible ways, their presence bending the world around them. They don't just threaten Julian physically, they seem drawn to the thing inside him, like they recognize what he's carrying. The horror in Centuria is never loud. It builds slowly, scene by scene. It doesn't need to scream. It festers. It infects. It's a psychological and existential horror that creeps up on you long after you've put the chapter down. Julian is a rare kind of protagonist. Not because he's the strongest or the smartest, but because of how deeply broken and yet quietly hopeful he is. He doesn't want revenge or power. He wants peace. He wants a family. And he wants to protect a baby who doesn't understand the cost of staying alive. In another story, that might be a path to redemption. In Centuria, it feels like a trap. Visually, the manga shows enormous potential. The art can be inconsistent, especially in human proportions, but where Kurami truly excels is in creature design. The monsters are grotesque, detailed, and feel genuinely alien. Panels featuring them echo the nightmarish visuals of Bloodborne or the body horror of Berserk. Every time they appear, they dominate the page and pull the reader into a place that feels hostile and wrong. As of now, Centuria has only 21 chapters, but within that short span, it has established a world where hope is a risk, kindness is punished, and survival is never free. It's not just a manga about monsters. It's about the cost of empathy in a world that doesn't allow it. It's about how far someone will go to protect a life that might not even be theirs to save. If you're looking for another power fantasy filled with flashy fights and clear-cut villains, this isn't it. But if you want a slow-burning nightmare about trauma, memory, and the things that live deep beneath the surface of the sea and of ourselves, Centuria is a story worth following. Because here, the ocean doesn't forgive, and it never forgets. If Centuria explored the weight of carrying too many souls, Mouthwashing examines what happens when you're trapped in a coffin of steel, orbiting nothingness, with nothing left but your own thoughts. This indie psychological horror game takes place aboard the Tulpar, a deep space vessel that suffers a mysterious accident. The communication system fails. The captain is left critically injured, the remaining crew is isolated and quickly running out of options. When they finally break into the supply cache, they find something that seems like a mistake or a cruel joke. No food, no water, just drums and drums of mouthwash. That's all there is. No explanation, no clear path forward. Just minty, stinging fluid and rising panic. What began as a survival scenario quickly turns into something else entirely. The game never tells you outright, but it starts to feel like the accident wasn't an accident at all. Whispers in logs, subtle looks and flashbacks, a creeping sense that someone, somewhere, planned this. The gameplay is as disorienting as the story. You're never given a stable timeline. One moment you're watching the captain fade in and out of consciousness, the next, you're reliving a traumatic memory you don't remember having. Time loops in on itself. Events blur. Reality softens at the edges. Each crew member begins to fracture under the pressure. Paranoia sets in, hallucinations become frequent, and interpersonal tension escalates into something more dangerous. You, as the player, are left with no allies and no real answers, just fragmentary logs, whispered confessions, and a sense of dread that doesn't go away, even when nothing's happening. And always, the mouthwash. It becomes a symbol of desperation. It's the only thing left to ingest, and the more the crew consumes it, the more they seem to lose memory, identity, empathy. There's a line that shows up again and again in their notes. What if the point of this mission was never to return? There are no monsters in this game, at least not in the traditional sense. No things crawling through the vents, no bloody creatures stalking you through the dark. The real horror is what's inside the characters, and what happens when they run out of distractions. It's existential decay, slow, personal, irreversible. Mouthwashing doesn't offer a clean resolution. It doesn't care about redemption or closure. You don't beat the game, you endure it. And in the end, there's no triumph, only quiet resignation. This isn't about space, it's about being alone for too long. It's about being forced to sit with everything you've buried, and realizing that, out here, in the silence between stars, the only voice left is your own. And you've stopped recognizing it. Imagine someone takes a beloved children's show, one that defined a generation, and uses it as a vessel for something entirely different. Something that doesn't fully understand what it's saying. Or worse, something that does, but shouldn't. That's RetroLand. At first glance, it looks like a parody of 31 Minutos, the iconic Chilean puppet news show known for its absurd humor and chaotic charm. A series remembered more fondly than most actual newscasts. But RetroLand isn't nostalgia, it's corpse. The videos started popping up on TikTok and YouTube. Short clips, broken puppets, distorted voices, hidden symbols. Tulio Trevino appears in all of them, but not the way you remember. His face is misaligned, his voice cracks and stutters. His eyes don't blink. They stare, past the screen, right behind you. He talks about death, about the end of time, about escaping your body, and sometimes he just falls silent, like he's waiting for you to answer. RetroLand presents itself as an analog horror series, but its structure is closer to an ARG, an alternate reality game. Each video is a puzzle piece in a larger mystery, filled with glitches, codes, biblical references, coordinates, and cryptic phrases. Online communities form to analyze the clues, cross-reference symbols, track down context. But there were no answers, only more fragments, and a growing sense of unease. And then, it got stranger. As the videos spread, people began sharing stories, ones that, at first, sounded like jokes. They claimed to have dreamed about the clips before ever seeing them. They recognized quotes, scenes, entire sequences. They said RetroLand felt too familiar, like déjà vu from another life, like it came from somewhere deeper than the internet. Some blamed it on a shared Mandela effect, others on subliminal programming, but a few went further. They said the series wasn't written, it was channeled, that the creator, if there even is one, wasn't inventing anything, just remembering from a collective unconscious. And perhaps the most disturbing part? No one knows who's behind it. There's no known author, no face, no description on the channel, no proper credits, just a scattering of hints, a symbol here, a cryptic file there, and a lingering sense that RetroLand isn't trying to tell a story. It's trying to get inside your head. Some believe it's just experimental art. Others say it's a critique of how children's media manipulates emotion and identity. But those who've watched it closely agree on one thing. There's something in RetroLand that isn't quite alive, but isn't dead either. Something stuck in the liminal space where memories rot, and nostalgia stops being comforting and starts being a warning. And if RetroLand reminded us that something is deeply broken in our collective memory, what comes next is a far more brutal warning, not about the past, but about the future. In the aftermath of global collapse, after the wars, the failed governments, and the total exhaustion of natural resources, humanity was left on the brink. Civilization didn't fall in flames, but in silence. There was no final explosion, no grand reckoning, just a slow collective fade into despair. And then something descended from the sky. Not a meteor, not an alien craft, something worse, something holy. It was an angel. But instead of falling to our knees, instead of seeking forgiveness or redemption, we captured it. That's the premise of Angel Engine, a haunting analog horror series that combines science fiction, religious symbolism, and pure existential dread. In this world, humanity's first contact with the divine isn't spiritual, it's industrial. The angel is not worshipped, it is studied, dismantled, and used. Scientists attach electrodes to its body, they bind it to machines, they install the angel in a containment facility and connect it to the power grid. And with every moment it remains alive, it bleeds energy, an infinite luminous resource that powers the last remaining cities on Earth. Its suffering becomes the cornerstone of our survival. The angel doesn't speak in human terms, but its pain leaks into the recordings, through corrupted files, broken signals, and moments of static where it pleads for help. Viewers of the series begin to recognize patterns in its distortion, phrases like, "You don't understand," or "He is coming." But these warnings are ignored, because something else is also speaking. There's another voice, a second entity, unseen, unnamed, and far more manipulative. It whispers to those in charge, convincing them to push further, to take more, to turn the miracle into a weapon. It doesn't scream or command, it encourages, it rationalizes, and they listen. The project spirals. Researchers begin experimenting on human subjects in an attempt to create artificial angels, biological constructs meant to mimic the original. They lure in volunteers with promises of enlightenment and transcendence, only to reduce them to grotesque failures, bodies that twitch, scream, and emit unnatural frequencies that fracture the minds of those nearby. They call these creatures echoes, failed simulations of the divine. The deeper you get into Angel Engine, the less you understand. The story is fragmented, told through scattered video logs, surveillance tapes, corrupted databases, and whispered testimonies. No one agrees on when the angel first appeared. Some documents say it fell. Others say it rose. Some even suggest it was always here, buried beneath the earth. And still, the experiments continue. The tone of the series is unrelenting. There are no heroes, no answers. Only the growing sense that humanity made a deal it cannot begin to comprehend, and that the price was not just the angel's pain, but our own undoing. Because here's the final twist. It's implied that the only reason we were able to capture the angel at all is because something else allowed it. Something bigger, something watching. And that entity, whatever it is, has finally arrived. Angel Engine doesn't scare you with monsters or gore. It scares you with consequences, with the idea that we had a chance to do something right, and instead chose to harness the divine, strip it down, and bleed it dry in the name of survival. Not because we had no choice, but because we wanted to. This is cosmic horror at its most intimate. The fear doesn't come from what's above. It comes from looking inward and realizing that even when faced with the miraculous, we'd rather build a machine out of it than ask why it came. And that's it for today. If you made it this far, congratulations. You've officially corrupted your algorithm. Your recommended videos are now cursed. You'll start seeing angelic reactors, haunted puppets, and indie games where the minty freshness of mouthwash becomes a symbol of slow, existential collapse. You're welcome, but seriously, thank you for watching. These new works of horror may be small, weird, or just starting out, but that's where the most interesting nightmares are born. Not in big-budget studios, but in quiet corners of the internet, where a single image can ruin your whole afternoon. If you enjoyed this, leave a comment, share your favorite obscure horror recommendation, or tell me which of these freaked you out the most, or least, or left you staring at your ceiling, wondering why everything smells like mint now. More stories are coming soon, from the abyss, as always. Until then, stay uncomfortable.